Sexual activity in marriage, sex outside of marriage, Proverbs Chapter 5, verses 15 through 21. And we will begin. This chapter is a record of Solomon's notes. You will recall that David, as the king of Israel, would gather his children together and give them Bible lessons, Bible teaching. And all of his children, there were 20 or more that would gather for these Bible classes. Only Solomon would take notes. And we know that because his notes are recorded in the book of Proverbs. So the first section of chapter 5 is the title or the introduction to the proverb, or we could say to chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. The second section is what I have called the truth about her and the truth about you, chapter 5, verses 6 through 14. And the third section is about marital pleasures of sensuality, verses 15 through 20. This is the section that we are going to focus our attention on. And the fourth section are the informed conclusions at the end of chapter 5 of the book of Proverbs. So this third section is about the marital pleasures of sensuality, verses 15 through 20. And as you are turning in your Bibles, let me begin by saying that we are looking at verse 15 to begin with, where the words say, "Drink water from your own cistern and fresh water from your own well." And so this is the verse which is before us. And I have an image which is in front on the screen. You can see that it is something that takes place at Christmas time. It is a winter cabin. You can see the snow out the window. You can see snowshoes. You can see a dog laying in front of the fireplace and a Christmas tree as well. A wise man once said, "Sex is like a fire. In a fireplace it keeps the house warm, but out of control a fire will burn the house down. Stoke up the fire and make it as hot as possible." And so says the wise man. Verse 15 begins with the words shethemein. And that is the word which means drink waters. It begins with a positive command. The command is drink. The picture that is presented is of a young man needing hydration so as to survive the desert heat. This hydration will save your life. And so let me change the words a little bit, or give the words the modification for the proper understanding of this passage, and that is the proper sex will save your life. And so we need to understand that that is what is being spoken about here. It is an issue with Scripture, and it is an issue with speaking from the pulpit, that language which is indelicate be limited as much as possible, and yet that the message would be true and accurate. The verb is also used to denote the act of feasting. The word means drink, but it also means to feast. And in our context, it makes perfect sense. So the idea is taking big gulps. Now, obviously, I've never been to a 7-Eleven store and seen a big gulp cup that big, but they are big. And when you get one, it's because you're really thirsty or you want it to last a long time. And that is the picture that is behind verse 15. If you want your sex to be satisfying, big gulp. If you want your sex to be long-lasting, to last for a long time during your marital life, big gulp. The picture that is presented in verse 15 is also one of refreshment. That is one in which you and your partner are refreshed. The source of this life-saving water is your own personal well. And so when we start to describe the personal well, this is in reference to your mate. And because this is addressed to a young man, it means his wife. So we see, first of all, that it saves lives. It allows you to survive the heat of the desert. And the accounts that I have read of how to survive in the desert say that you should always have water with you, especially when you don't know how long it's going to take for you to get from point A to point B. And then when you drink, not to just sip, but to take big gulps so that you don't lose water or moisture in the transition. Your organs need to be hydrated so that they don't begin to shut down little by little. The accounts that I have read also said that the people of the desert, Bedouins for instance, wear heavy clothing because it allows them to reject the ultraviolet rays, and even though they seem hot at the time, the wool forms an insulation which allows the body to keep its own body temperature and not that of the outside environment. So when you take a big gulp, you are able then to preserve the thermal quality of your body temperature. So that is what saves your life. But water also provides refreshment. It allows you and your mate to be able to enjoy your company one with another, and there is a great deal of security that is afforded with that. And now number 3, the source of this life-saving water is your own personal well. Now, the personal well, there is a doubling up of words, but the concept is the same. And so let me read this to you. It says, verse 15, drink water from your own cistern, there's one word, and fresh water from your own well. The two words are cistern and well. These words are stacked one upon the other, and that allows us to understand that it's the same concept, but that it is very emphatic. So the words are cistern and well. These are the words that get doubled up or get piggybacked one upon the other. The difference is that a cistern is only a chamber in which water is kept. Usually a cistern is underground, but not always. The well is also a hole in the ground, but it is constantly fed by an underground river. And so you have two sources of water, but you will see that both of these are stacked one upon the other, and the meaning is amazing. Both the cistern and the well require digging. You can't have one without the other. You cannot have a well and you cannot have cistern unless you have done the preparatory work in digging the hole. Now either cistern or well will bring satisfaction and relaxation to you. This dual construction that we find in verse 15 is like an hendiades. And a hendiades has one leg of the figure elaborating the other, so that the figure is actually more than the sum of its parts. Let me see if I can illustrate that a little clearer. Your cistern, that is leg number 1 of the hendiades, and fresh water, that is the connector, or the hinge between leg 1 and leg 2, your own well. And so what you have when you have a figure of speech that is like this, and the hendiades is functioning, is that leg 1 and leg 2 combine to present the concept, and the concept is greater than its parts. So now we have put the two together, your cistern and your own well. This speaks of survival under the normal circumstances of life. And you're probably wondering what it is that I mean by that. Well, with a cistern and a well, these are things which appear in your backyard. And these are things that, if they are in your backyard, it means that you live in town or you live close to town, and you are a functional member of the local society. And as a functioning member of the local society, you stand alone or you are independent, so that you have your sexual activity in your own home with your own wife. So this particular figure of speech speaks of survival under the normal circumstances of life. This is not a chance finding of an oasis in the desert. This is when you say, any water will give me the strength to continue my journey through the desert until I get home. This is not that. This speaks of a constant source of water, like a backyard well. A well from which you can draw every day, and thus live your life in society without making enemies, sexual and otherwise. All right, verse 15, part A. This verse begins with a positive command, drink. We have seen that. Letter B, the words own cistern refer to your own wife. This means that whatever refreshment you get, whatever survival you get, is to be limited to your own wife. This is not just an endorsement of monogamy, but an emphasis on personal and private sexual indulgence. There are some people who think that sexual indulgence means that you must go from partner to partner to partner. But that is not what is being taught in this verse. What is being taught in this verse is that there should be repeated sexual activity, but that it should be limited to your own partner, in this case your own wife. A cistern is a large container used to gather water from streams or aqueducts. This speaks of gathering of many experiences getting converted to sensual affections. And so a cistern collects water from rain, or it collects water from other sources, and this is the same as when your wife has been able to keep in her memory the various gentle and pleasant experiences that she has had with you, and then she converts those to her sensual affections for you. And so this figure of a cistern is very, very graphic, because it shows you the difference between the promiscuous woman who only gives of her body, but that there is no quality affection given. In fact, a lot of prostitutes will say, yes, you can have sex with me, but do not kiss. There is no kissing involved. And you will often hear the phrase or the slogan, no glove, no love, because that way you reduce the possibility of spreading a sexually transmitted disease. Since the promiscuous woman is in the business of just selling her body, there is no intimate, pleasant experiences that can be converted to sensual affections for her husband. And so the picture of a cistern here is very, very graphic. The words freshwater refer to the satisfying quality of the affections that are given by the wife. Now you'll notice that fresh water is what comes from a well. And so the question sometimes is asked, well, what is meant by fresh water? Well, the Hebrew actually means running water or water that is coming from a river, a stream, a creek. It is moving water. It is not water which is stuck. It is not water which is just standing with no movement or current whatsoever. And this fresh water then implies that the water will constantly be fresh and that the water will constantly be cold. So the words own well, once again, refer to the aquifer on your own land, that is the underground river provided by God, and this is a gift of God's grace. So when the young man is lawfully connected with his right woman, or with the wife that he has taken, then he has received a gift from God that will give him fresh water, that is water which is refreshing, water that is not stank, it has not stuck in a place, and it is not black water, it is fresh water, it is constantly running, it is constantly aerating itself so that it is pure, and secondly, the water is cold so that it refreshes the soul which has begun to thirst because of the desert heat. So the words own well is in reference to an aquifer that is on your own land. It is that underground river which keeps the water fresh. A well is something that you must work at in order to get it to produce its refreshment. A well is not something that appears by itself. A well is something that must be dug. This means that as a husband, that there is cultivating that you must do in order to keep your sex life alive. It is something that you must do in order to be able to do that. This is much harder than it looks. In other words, it's easier said than done. The reason why is because your sex life, for it to be fresh and for it to be slaking or slaking your thirst, it must be fresh, it must be running, and that is the term that is used to describe your partner's mental attitude. There is so much that you can do as far as your partner's mental attitude. You are not responsible for the attitudes that your wife has. You are not responsible for the thoughts that she has. She is responsible for those. However, you do the cultivating, and if she is in fellowship with the Lord, she will produce the fresh water which is so desperately needed by you. Verses 16, 17, and 18. Should your springs be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Question mark. Let them be yours alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Verse 16. And once again, let me say that this third section is a section that deals with marital pleasures of sensuality. Verse 16 presents a censorious question with an image of comparing streams. And streams are compared here, and we have to understand what the word streams actually is in reference to. There is a reference here to masculine semen. There is a reference here to the fresh water from the woman's innermost being. And there is the reference to the stream of the two people together in God's will. So let's begin. The first stream is that of the young man's seed. And so the question was asked in verse 16, should your springs, there's the first stream, be dispersed abroad? This is a censorious question, and because it's in reference to a young man's seed, we have to understand what the purpose or how the question is posed. The second stream is that of the adultress, meandering lifestyle. As we have seen last week, the adulteress, or the promiscuous woman, goes from one lifestyle to another. She cares not for her paramours. She has no thought which is of any profundity. She is totally shallow, and she doesn't care how life will turn out. She is completely a shallow person. The third stream is his seed, the young man's seed, coursing with the seed of his right woman. This is what is meant by a blessed fountain. The fountain is blessed because the two of them are living a life together. They have made a life together, and as such, they have formed a new stream. The two streams of their life are now joined into one confluity of stream. Perhaps you have heard that particular phrase in many a wedding service. Letter B. This censorious question picks a fight. And so let me see if I can illustrate to you how this fight is provoked. By a backwash of adultery, I mean this is what happens when adultery splashes back on you. Now, I could as easily have said, bites you on your gluteus maximus, but I'm not. I am going to be more delicate, and I am going to say that this is what happens when adultery, that is, the sin of having sex outside of marriage, splashes back on you. And so let me begin with the first of these. You will lose your reputation. You will lose your reputation of being an honorable man, being a man who keeps his word, being a man who stays within the lines of God's design. You will lose your reputation as being a man who recognizes that God has laid down a template for a proper union between a man and a woman, and you have said, no, I think my idea is better. So you lose your reputation of having that lofty reputation of following God's template. Secondly, you will lose your family. You're a married man, you have a wife, and you have children. You love your children, at least you love your children, and you possibly still love your wife. But when you have an adulterous affair, you will lose your family. They will no longer look upon you with admiration. They will no longer look upon you with the confidence that you will keep your word. They will no longer look upon you as actually being part of the family, since you have stepped out of the family. And so you will lose your family. You don't think that it's going to be very costly, but let me tell you, the cost is more than you can bear. There are very few things which cost as much as the loss of your family. There's also the loss of finances. When you maintain a sexual affair, usually some of your money goes to the paramour. And so the home is not getting all of the funds that it could get. Your investments have been diversified because you are now keeping two homes. And if a divorce should take place, the funds will be not only diversified, but will be eradicated for you. You will have only a small portion of your income, since most of it will go to those who were your family, wife and children. And then there is the loss of health. When you are involved in an adulterous affair and you come into a confrontation with your wife about the affair, the stress levels in you rise dramatically. And when they rise dramatically, your immune system is diminished, it is reduced. That means that it opens you up to infections of many kinds. As a result, your health becomes diminished, and you begin, or you accelerate the diminishing of your physical life. And the sufferings that you would normally undergo are now exacerbated because of the additional stress in your life. The stress comes in many different forms, but probably the biggest form is in being able to face your wife and being able to look at her in the eye, and for her to know that you have not kept your vows. And then, number 5, there is the loss of privacy or secrecy. You wanted to keep the affair a secret. You wanted to keep it under wraps. You did not want the neighborhood or the community to know about it. You didn't want your friends to know about it, those people that held you in high esteem. But it comes out. You may have thought, well, what I'm doing behind closed doors, and so it really shouldn't matter. But the loss of secrecy is one of the things that comes out. So this is the backwash of adultery. Letter C. The word streams in the street, or this phrase, pictures children that are born out of wedlock. And so the idea in verse 16 is that streams of water in the streets. The idea is that when you walk down the street, that there will be children that you actually fathered, but you are ashamed to own. There are children that are actually yours, or there are children that you are accused of fathering, but you don't know for sure because the woman who gave them birth has been sleeping with other men. And so you don't know whether that child is yours or not yours. And so in verse 16 we have these words, should your springs be dispersed abroad? Streams of water in the streets? And this is a censorious question. In other words, are you sure? What are you doing? Now, letter D, The word streets here speak of the ripple effect, and that is that not only are you affected by these children who are in the street, but so is your wife, so are your bona fide children, so is your mother, your father, because when they go down the street, somebody might call them grandma, somebody might call them grandpa, and you didn't know about it, or grandma didn't know about it, and the shame is unbelievable. There is a ripple effect, and the ripple effect doesn't stop at the first confrontation. It goes on year after year after year, and the influence that takes place from child to the sire, or from the child to the father and to the grandparent, is unbelievable. Verse 17. And so let me read verses 16, 17, and 18. Should your springs be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? We just covered that. Now verse 17. Let them be yours alone, and not for strangers with you. And that is the verse that we want to get. Let them be yours alone. This refers to the offspring. This refers to those children in the streets that we have mentioned before. Letter B. Credible offspring will bring honor to you by being loyal to your family and being loyal to the nation. In other words, when you have discreditable offspring, they will not be loyal to the family because they will feel the prejudice. They will not be loyal to the nation because they have no root. They have no way of relating to the nation as being one of the four divine institutions, and they cannot find their way to be loyal to the nation. This is, of course, what will destroy the heart of a nation when you have a population that is not loyal to the nation. A commentator from last century, Adam Clarke, has this comment on Proverbs 5 and verse 17. Quote, "A bastard brood, however numerous, is no credit to any man. Promiscuous women will claim that their offspring is yours and demand child support." So our verse says, let them be yours alone, and not for strangers with you. Verse 18. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Verse 18. The second part of this verse tells the young man to rejoice in the wife of his youth. Verse 18. Let your fountain be blessed. And then the second part tells the young man to rejoice in the wife of his youth. The word usmach is the word that's in the red print. Usmach me esheth nu ek. And I didn't pronounce that last word correctly. Neureka. The first word, usmach, is a word which means to be glad. In Exodus 4 and 14, you have an account of when Moses and Aaron found each other in the desert, and that they were glad to see each other. This word means to be glad. And when you rejoice with your wife, there is a gladness that takes place. Usmach also means to exercise satisfaction. And for that, I would like to have you, we'll have to cover this again next Sunday, but we will look at Leviticus 23:40, Deuteronomy 12:7, 12:18, and verse 25. And this word means to exercise satisfaction. Thirdly, usmach means a joyful recognition of victory, deliverance, and the recognition of a future. 1 Samuel 19:5, Ezra 6:2. With these passages of Scripture, I will now say that we will finish this teaching session. We'll take a 10-minute break, come back at noon,